All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. If you're wondering, hey, is that a new jacket on Cenk? Yes. So obviously it'll be discussed in the post game.
It fits. It looks good.
Interesting. Okay. Lots of kidding around and discussion of that. For those of you who like that kind of stuff in post game and old school, which are much more lighthearted. In old school, a couple of weeks ago, I explained how rich people can tell I'm not one of them. Okay, a telltale sign that I have, which I think you'll enjoy. tyt.com/join to get all the Young Turks shows, the super serious ones and the lighthearted ones. So today's show is largely on the more serious side. I don't know if I'll be angry or amused at Kanye West or is it ye or yay?
I don't know.
Okay.
No one should care.
Craig, is it
Period.
Yay? Okay, yay. We'll be talking about yay later. And his drive to abolish the 13th Amendment, which outlawed slavery. Yay!
I don't get it. Is he looking for a spot on Turning Point USA? Like, you're making your money, homeboy. Like, what are you doing?
No, first of all, he's bankrupt. Let's just remember how he was begging Zuckerberg, et cetera, for money. He's like, what's $50 million among friends? So back then he was using race to his advantage. Anyways, we'll discuss that story later. I just would like to do like a victory trot on, told you, he's a lunatic. Anyone who thought he was a genius, sorry, not remotely close. One of the dumbest people in the country. Okay, anyways, we'll get to that story a little bit later, so hang in there. We got a interesting and in parts fun show for you today. So let's get started.
All right. There's been some confusion involving the FBI investigation into the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. The White House was pretty clear in saying that they wanted to limit the scope of the investigation, but following an NBC report that really delved into how limited the investigation would be, Trump denied that he was trying to limit it at all. In fact, he disputed this report from NBC News and then also said that the White House counsel's office provided the FBI, he disputed the NBC report, but the White House counsel's office provided the FBI with a list of witnesses they are permitted to interview about 2 of the 3 claims made against Brett Kavanaugh. Now that was the news as of this morning. So Julie Swetnick, who was the 3rd accuser, was not included on that list. Dianne Feinstein was fighting rather aggressively in order to obtain that list of people that the FBI was allowed to speak to based on what the White House said. And then all of a sudden, Trump is now changing his tune and he's saying that he will allow for the expansion of this FBI investigation. So this just recently broke. He said, I think the FBI should do what they have to do to get the answer. He also said, now with that being said, I'd like it to go quickly. And the reason I'd like it to go quickly, very simple, so simple, because it's unfair to Kavanaugh at this point. So no one is trying to change the 1-week time frame, but based on what we were learning as of this morning, it seemed as though the FBI was only allowed to talk to 4 individuals, and that is not enough. There are a bunch of other witnesses who could provide information to the FBI. Julie Swetnick should be someone who the FBI speaks to as well. Now it appears that that will likely happen given the pressure on the Trump administration.
Yeah, so 2 things here. First off, let's acknowledge the obvious. The investigation was limited in scope in the beginning. It is now apparently less limited, which is an admission that it was originally limited. You can't, if it was unlimited to begin with, a new policy would not be necessary. So that's a fact. And so the question as to how limited it was is a good question. There's some reports out that it was limited to just 4 people, which is a joke. And obviously that doesn't do enough. But there's one other thing that people are not considering though, when we talk about the scope of the FBI investigation and the timing of it. So they have a week. The question is, how much manpower do they have? I've seen that discussion almost nowhere, right? So if you have a week and you got 2 guys chasing it down, you'll get nothing. If you have 20 guys chasing it down, you might get something. If you got 200 guys chasing it down, a week might be plenty. So I don't know the answer to that question. It's one that I think should be asked, but no one's asking. And then we get to Swetnick, which is point 2 here. So she has super significant charges. If attempted rape wasn't horrific enough for you, she alleges gang rape involving Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge, that they were part of a group of guys who would spike people's drinks and then quote unquote train them. If you've never heard of that term, it is many men taking turns on one woman. I remember seeing that in pop culture and thinking, well, that it was a myth, that never really happened. And then I remember naively thinking, man, if it ever did happen, man, it's funny what people are into. No, idiot, no, they weren't into it. The way that it happens is that their drinks are spiked, etc. They're unconscious in some way. Of course. But if you've never done that type of thing, it wouldn't even occur to a decent person what in the world that would entail. But the reason I bring it up in this context is, if it's really as outrageous as Kavanaugh and Trump suggest, wouldn't you want the FBI investigating that to be able to disprove it and get an easy layup? My God, that would help your case so much. All you had to do, realistically, for Kavanaugh, if the FBI says, Ramirez or Swetnick or anyone does not had problems with their stories in any way, shape, or form, they could easily come out and be like, that's it, we told you, right? So the fact that they don't want people looking into Swetnick, man, that's weird.
Well, there are 2 issues here. So of course, the number 1 issue that's front and center includes the allegations, the sexual assault allegations against Kavanaugh. But there are also issues in terms of his testimony, because he is being accused of lying about a number of things, including his drinking when he was in high school and college. So previously, the FBI was not allowed to talk to any of his former classmates who argue that he lied about his drinking habits. And I thought that was fascinating. Look, Republicans have been basically pressured and forced into this investigation. They've been trying to prevent the investigation from happening, and I think that means something, because if you genuinely think that the person you're trying to confirm as a Supreme Court justice is innocent, and this is nothing more than a smear campaign that's being launched by the Democrats, you would want the investigation. And I understand wanting to limit the timing of the investigation, because they're very much concerned that, hey, if it takes too long, we might lose power in the Senate, and then we're gonna deal with obstruction from Democrats when it comes to Supreme Court nominees. But in this case, why did they try to limit it to only 4 witnesses? Why did they have to get pressured and forced into the investigation, even after Democrats told them, all right, we're gonna limit the timing of it to 1 week? They think he's guilty. That's my perception of it, because if you genuinely think that he's innocent, you wouldn't have to be forced the way that Republicans have been forced.
Yeah, but let me break it down to 2 different categories. I get why they want to limit it in scope in some respects. So what they want to say is, hey, I don't want you to go into perjury issues, because then Kavanaugh's in a lot of trouble. So as we've explained on a number of occasions, he perjured himself earlier in the judicial hearings on a couple of cases, including his handling of Charles Pickering when he was at the Bush White House, Emmanuel Miranda situation. So they're saying, let's not go back and relitigate that. But also, very importantly, Kavanaugh is clearly lying about how much he drank and the effects that had in college. And as we have said repeatedly, Sheldon Whitehouse pointed out, his descriptions of what he wrote in his yearbook meant are obvious lies. Everyone in the country knows that those are lies. So the Trump people are saying, don't look into those. I don't want to get into perjury. We just want to look into the sexual assault allegations. I understand their motivation, right? Mm-hmm. And so, okay, that's one thing. When you look into the sexual assault allegations, you cannot limit the scope there, I think. And again, so here, let me give you an extreme example to give you a sense of why I wouldn't want the scope limited if I was the one that was charged. So I'm gonna give a preposterous example here. If someone accused me of being a jockey, as in the guys who ride horses around for a living, I would say, no, that's outrageous, I've never done that. And if you wanna get into an investigation of that, and there are several different charges, and you wanna get into whether I ever rode a horse, okay, well, I can see how you'd be concerned. Maybe they twist that and say, hey, does that lead to, but I never got paid. This is getting crazy enough as it is. But let me get to the extreme part so that it's crystal clear. If one of the 3 accusations is that I used to ride unicorns, I would say, please investigate that, because whether I'm guilty or not guilty of whatever insane charge in this example, right? I know I didn't ride unicorns. I know they're gonna be able to disprove that pretty easily. So whether I'm correct or not on the rest of it, I would want them to look into the unicorn thing because it would disprove the charges. So Kavanaugh, et cetera, should be like, look at Sweatnik, look at Sweatnik. I mean, the gang rape, are you insane? Are you insane? Look into her allegations, there's no way that's gonna hold, right? But they're like, no, don't do it.
And those are the most serious allegations. I mean, look, they're all horrible, don't get me wrong, but none of the allegations, with the exception of Julie Sweatnik's, involved penetration, actual like physical penetration rape, right? And so why is it that that was the one accusation or one accuser that they did not want to have the FBI look into? Look, I like that they got pressured into expanding the FBI investigation. I like that for once, Democrats are doing the right thing and they are fighting aggressively. The fact that Dianne Feinstein was really raising the alarm raising the alarm regarding that list that the White House gave to the FBI, I don't think we would have really known about it. We wouldn't be as aware of it. And so I think that the Democrats putting pressure on Senate Republicans and Trump's White House is really making an impact here. And by the way, for me, if he gets cleared, good. At least we know, hey, if he gets confirmed, he's not guilty of doing this, right? Based on what the FBI investigated and what they found or didn't find. But this investigation needs to happen to either clear his name or find out that he did it and has no place in the Supreme Court. Yeah. Okay.
Devil's Triangle is not a drinking game.
Yeah.
Kavanaugh. All right, I'm gonna say one last thing about this. Although I have plenty of opportunity. But anyway, James Comey wrote an op-ed saying, here's what we know at the FBI. Little lies are usually an indication that there are bigger lies. And Kavanaugh told a lot of little lies. And so if the FBI is not allowed to investigate perjury and those little lies like ralphing because of drinking, not because of spicy fish or whatever he claimed, spicy food, and the Devil's Triangle is not a drinking game, et cetera, right? I get it. They're not going to keep him off the Supreme Court for those lies, although perjury is perjury, and Kavanaugh wanted to impeach Bill Clinton based on perjury, just like that. But if it in fact does lead to bigger lies, that's the heart of the question. And if I'm an FBI agent, I come in thinking, well, everybody in the country knows you were lying about what you wrote in the yearbook. So now I'm curious to see what else you were lying about.
Exactly. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we have Jeff Flake on 60 Minutes, what he had to say about this investigation. And then later on, Tucker Carlson, Alan Dershowitz argue that this whole Kavanaugh thing is a race war because they're insane.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right, that when we return. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Member section comments first. Captain Cornball says, do you think Sweatnik's choice of lawyer may have had anything to do with how limited the scope of the original investigation was? Well, her lawyer should obviously be irrelevant to this, but I'm going to go to a tweet here because it's on the same topic. Old Turk says, Trump believes Sweatnik. He wouldn't have blocked the FBI from the layup otherwise. Love him or hate him, Avenatti is batting 1,000. So, well, we'll see about that. But I know that the Trump and the Republicans can't stand Avenatti, but that's irrelevant to whether this actually happened to Sweatnik or not. Meg says they only allowed this investigation as cover so they can vote yes. Certainly the go-to plan, Meg. We'll see if that works or not, and that's why they wanted it to be super quick. Obviously, they're bias is clear. And so last one from the member section. Gabby Marita says that this FBI fiasco is exactly what Trump would do to the Russia investigation if he got rid of Rosenstein. Pick who the investigators are allowed to talk to and demand that they do it within a timetable solely determined by him. Yes, very, very likely. Now, we were in the member section. Before I go anywhere else, let me just do a quick check on the thermometer here. We haven't checked that in a couple of days. So, 32,401. Can I see 32,500? Can I see 32,500 by the end of the day? Okay, very unlikely, but let's give it a shot. Okay.
Why? 99 people.
That's not too much to ask for, 99 people. So, tyt.com/join, obviously, to become a member. Last two things here are from Twitter. So, Lefty Green 75 says, perjury is perjury, whether it's a little lie or a big lie. Cav should be facing impeachment, not confirmation. Well, Kavanaugh's standards on that same issue, it says, yes, absolutely right. Kavanaugh believed that Bill Clinton should be impeached for perjury on a sexual issue. By his own standards, he should definitely be impeached. Last one is Aloha Debt Free writes in using hashtag TYT Live. I thought a red wave was coming in November. If that's true, why not take as long as you need to do the FBI investigation?
Yeah, it's such a great point. That's such a great point.
Yeah, well, what happened to the red wave? It seems like you're a little concerned that perhaps it might be a blue wave. Fascinating. Okay, and by the way, if you're already a member or you want to help in any other way, we created a link just for you guys. tyt.com/yes. If you like what we're saying on air and you want to help contribute to the home of progressives and to the message that we're spreading, and a lot of you said some wonderful things, and we really, really appreciate it. Throughout our Kavanaugh coverage. This is a good way of doing it. tyt.com/yes. You can get, you like something? Yeah, like a hair. There's $1, okay? Whatever you can afford, if you want to do that, that is also very, very much appreciated here and helps keep the lights on. So thank you guys. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. Senators Jeff Flake and Chris Coons were on 60 Minutes, and Flake said something really interesting about what he would do if he were seeking re-election. Now, he was specifically commenting on the FBI investigation involving Brett Kavanaugh. And if you can recall, Flake did something pretty remarkable last Friday when, during the Senate Judiciary Committee's voting session on Kavanaugh, he called for this FBI investigation. Now, it was after 2 sexual assault victims approached him and confronted him at an elevator. But nonetheless, here's what Flake had said during this session to vote for Kavanaugh's confirmation.
And I think it would be proper to delay the floor vote for up to, but not more than 1 week, in order to let the FBI continue to do an investigation limited in time and scope to the current allegations that are there, and limited in time to no more than 1 week.
So that was unexpected, it was surprising, and he was asked about it while appearing on 60 Minutes. And here is what he had to say.
Senator Flake, you've announced that you're not running for re-election, and I wonder, could you have done this if you were running for re-election?
No, not a chance.
Not a chance?
No.
Because politics has become too sharp, too partisan?
Yeah, there's no value to reaching across the aisle. There's no currency for that anymore. There's no incentive.
I think that that's both super obvious and, in a sense, a startling admission at the same time. So it's, and I know that the interviewer there is doing a good job of drawing out the answer, and so I don't think he's actually startled. But it frames it that way, and in a lot of the conversations on television, it is assumed that these are good, honorable people that actually have their own opinions and are acting based on their ideology and principles rather than political expediency. And that is a super annoying and obviously massively wrong assumption. And here you have 2 senators, a Republican and a Democrat, both nodding their head to this, and the Republican saying, if I was up for election, of course I would have done the dishonorable thing. Of course I would have done the thing that I don't believe in. Of course I would have tried to block the truth. Of course Of course. So it's just, and then why do I say it's a startling admission? Because the politicians almost never admit it. This is Flake on his way out going, what did you guys think we were doing? Of course we're not gonna ever reach across the aisle. And so this is why, it's so frustrating, Anna, because when Obama was president, for 8 years, we said on this show, stop trying to reach across the aisle. Why? Because we're doing likewise? Oh, we'll punish you if you do that? No, because it is obviously not reciprocal. And anyone paying a modicum of attention to politics in today's environment understands that the Republicans will never reciprocate, because and it is a ridiculous, naive proposition that they have real principles and that they're making decisions based on anything but politics. And by the way, a lot of political expediency. It's not just about the votes, it's about whatever their donors told them to do. That's the people who determine whether they're gonna get elected more than anyone else. So for Obama to have played into that farce for about 6 out of his 8 years as president was atrocious. He was wrong. I don't know if he did it on purpose and he was just winking and nodding like, haha, I'll play along because I actually want the Republicans to halfway win. Or if he was really that ridiculously naive. And the entire Democratic establishment went along with that, and the entire media went along with that. Can I get an apology now? You were wrong and we were right. The Republicans were never ever going to bend. And it is about politics, it's never about their principles. So having beer summits with them is honestly the dumbest, biggest waste of time.
So one thing that, I have so many thoughts on this. So one thing that stood out to me about Flake's decision and his actions on Friday was, once he had already internally realized that he wanted the FBI investigation, he actually decided to step outside with Senator Coons and discuss it with him. And so, as you know, Coons is a Democrat, and they're actually genuinely friends, which I did not buy into before, but I looked into it further, and they're friends. And the fact that they're willing to work together, would give me some hope if Flake didn't give up, right? Look, and I don't agree with Flake on 99% of things, but the fact that he's willing to look at a situation like this through the eyes of a human as opposed to a Republican, it is a good thing. Now, let me just put that aside real quick.
Oh, no, I know, but it's just, again, he's saying, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done the right thing if I was seeking re-election.
So let's address that. As you guys know, when it comes to Kavanaugh, like I've mentioned the corporate donors, he's a very business-friendly, corporate-friendly judge, and I think that's one of the main reasons why there's this, urgency to push him through. That, in addition to the fact that he would probably help Trump in this whole Mueller investigation. But there's also a third issue here, right? And that is the voters. Cenk, you shared that survey, that poll that showed that the majority of Republican voters would still want to confirm Brett Kavanaugh, even if he did do this, even if he was found guilty of these accusations. What does that mean? I mean, they're doing this based on partisanship, right? Yeah. They're not doing this because they think that Brett Kavanaugh is a good guy or that they don't genuinely think that these accusations are horrible. They're doing this because Kavanaugh is their guy and they're going to support him no matter what. And so what are lawmakers supposed to do when voters are like this?
Yeah, and now here's where the media will again do false equivalency. And they'll say, well, you guys are driving people to the left. No, we're driving them to the center based on actual polling. There's a giant difference between my Republican donor told me I have to fill in the blank, start a giant war, give a giant tax cut to the rich, make sure Kavanaugh is approved because he votes with corporations nearly every single time an issue comes up, and is one of the most draconian judges against employee rights in the whole country. So appealing to those donors, and by the way, a lot of Democrats do likewise, is totally different than actually appealing to your voters. Well, my voters don't want me to cut Social Security and Medicare. Yeah, of course you should be responsive to that. It'd be crazy not to be responsive to that. By the way, a lot of the mainstream media and the corporate Democrats do push you to be non-responsive to your voters. They go, how dare you? We need bipartisanship. Not on anything that would help Americans, but on things that would hurt Americans. It would be true bipartisanship to cut Social Security and Medicare, but the left doesn't want us to. No, 84% of the country doesn't want you to. That's a poll, that's reality, that's et cetera. Now, The Republicans, on the other hand, driven almost purely by corporate donor interests, say no, 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 based on what those billionaire and multi-billion-dollar corporations want. That is a completely different animal. So please stop having disingenuous conversations. And I laid this out as a marker. Now, Flake just admitted it. Now we all know. It's not, what do you think, Flake's different? Do you think that the other Republicans are more principled? No one in their right mind believes that, right? So will the media now adjust and go, oh, well, of course, the politicians are doing things based on politics and based on their donors' wishes, not based on what their voters want? No, they will never admit it. They will ignore this. This is the last time you'll see it in the mainstream media.
I mean, look, I see a little more of a willingness to call out the politics, but definitely not the corporate donors. You hear very little talk, if any talk, about corporate donors and how much they influence these lawmakers to do the things that they do. But one other thing that Flake touched on that I thought was interesting was the issue of perjury. Now, Kavanaugh has been accused of lying on multiple occasions. Let's just focus purely on the last hearing that happened involving Dr. Blasey Ford. Totally minimized his drinking, lied about the Renata alumni reference in his yearbook. I mean, one lie after the other. And so Flake was asked, what do you think about this? What if he's found to have lied? What would you do? Let's take a look.
If Judge Kavanaugh is shown to have lied to the committee, nomination's over?
Oh, yes. I would think so.
No, I don't believe him.
Yeah, that I don't believe either.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a totally fine line of questioning. It's as as good a job as mainstream press is going to do. I know. I'm sorry if that sounds condescending, but look, and you wouldn't get the interview otherwise. Let's just keep it real too. But if I was asking Jeff Flake questions, and there's a reason why he wouldn't come and do an interview with me, I would say, well, okay, Senator Flake, do you really believe that the Devil's Triangle is a drinking game? Or do you think that perhaps Judge Kavanaugh lied about it? Do you really believe that the Renata alumnus is a reference to how much they respected that one woman that 14 guys referenced in their yearbook? Do you really believe that? Or do you believe that might have been perjury? Do you really believe that his, references to, I mean, you can go on and on, Ralphing, boof, whatever, doof, whatever it is, right? Do you believe any of those things? Do you believe that his drinking was not in excess when almost all of his classmates say that he regularly drank to excess and was stumbling drunk and aggressive when he drank? We have all of these witnesses who account to that. He claims he's just a normal drinker. I mean, look, that's what drives me crazy about Kavanaugh and what leads me to believe that he's lying about everything. Because you didn't have to lie about any of those things.
Right.
No one cares if you drank a lot in college. I know you're trying to protect yourself. Well, if I drank a lot and I might have blacked out and you might think that I did this thing. I understand that whole context. But if he said, look, guys, I didn't do the sexual assault, but yeah, I drank way too much in college, no one would have cared. But he's a natural liar. And he has said, let alone to politicalize the Pickering, the Manuel Miranda lies from earlier hearings. So it's not true that Flake thinks lying would disqualify him. I guess what he's alluding to, if I'm going to be generous to him, is if he lied about the sexual assault, then that would be disqualifying. And yes, if they proved that, I would imagine it would be disqualifying for a lot of people, not just Flake.
Right, yeah. I mean, look, if that's what he's being specific about, it wasn't clear in that answer. But remember, that Senate Judiciary Committee vote happened the day after that special hearing involving Dr. Blasey Ford's testimony, and it was so clear that he was lying in that case. So clear. I mean, there were so many references. By the way, one reference that we just didn't have time to get to last week when we covered all of his lies was that he kept reiterating that when he was 18, at that point in Maryland, it was legal to drink. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. At that point, the law had already changed to 21 and older.
Yeah,
come on.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. What a ridiculous lie, because it's such a minor issue. In this case, quite literally. Who cares? You drank as a minor. No one cares. Why does he lie about that? No, because I did everything right. I was a choir boy. I didn't drink to excess. I didn't drink when I was a minor. I never broke the law. Why? Because he's lying. He's lying about this, and this. I mean, again, it's not a great guy to quote, but James Comey in the op-ed saying when you're an investigator, little lies usually are indication of much bigger lies. And he lies about every little thing when he doesn't need to. It's almost like an instinct. I think I've seen that somewhere else before. Trump. But look, this FBI investigation, we're all on the edge of our seats. The whole country, I think, is on the edge of our seat. If they do a real one, my guess is they will expose many different lies. Here, look, I'll give you a sense of what's coming up next. They're talking to Debbie Ramirez, the one who made the allegation about him Kavanaugh exposing himself to her and putting a penis in front of her face while they were drinking. She then gave a list of the people at the party. If they get one person to confirm that that's exactly what happened, bad news for Kavanaugh. Now look, if they get no one and people say we were at the party and it didn't happen, good news for Kavanaugh. So we're all on the edge of our seat.
Right. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about what right-wingers are saying about the Kavanaugh case. Members of the right wing do not believe that the allegations about Brett Kavanaugh and this whole debacle has anything to do with sexual assault or the mistreatment of women. In fact, people like Alan Dershowitz and Tucker Carlson believe that this is all part of a giant race war. Now, there were two specific segments on Fox News that touched on this, and I want to give you Tucker Carlson's reaction first. Now, according to Carlson, the reaction to Kavanaugh demonstrated the left's war on old white men. Carlson ran a whole segment on his show devoted to race, with one of the chyrons on screen reading, quote, "Left makes Kavanaugh hearing about race." Now, I'm going to show you some video in a second, but when did the left make this about race? Like when? Other than the very accurate statement involving the double standard in our justice system regarding accusations of sexual assault. Like, we're very quick to accept similar allegations when someone of a person of color is accused of something like this. But when you're a wealthy person, you deal with the upper level of the justice system, which affords you the benefit of the doubt. That is the only time I've heard anything about race. Now, with that said, here's what Tucker Carlson had to say. He's talking to a guest about this whole situation.
What the hell does race have to do with this case?
It has nothing to do with it, Tucker, but I mean, I think there are a couple of things going on here. Number one, what we're seeing is a phenomenon that's been happening in America over the last few years, and it has become fashionable now to be beat up on white men and whites more generally because we have this culture of spoils where we are being told that you are entitled to certain things in society and certain jobs and certain places.
Are you worried that if dumb people like David Gergen or all the rest at CNN keep up with the race hatred, that will actually encourage some kind of conflict? You've seen this in a lot of different countries. We really don't want it here. But could we get there if they don't stop?
We have it, Tucker. Oh my gosh! So on Berkeley campus across the street where I'm helping with litigation over there are places where whites are not supposed to go. I mean that is apartheid. It's apartheid on our college campuses. It's outrageous. But at a higher level, stepping back from the cultural disintegration of this phenomenon, the Democrats are seizing on any kind of club that they have handy. So if you got a white man in front of you, let's beat up on him for being a white man. If it's Ben Carson,
maybe it
call him
works.
Uncle Tom.
You're right. I mean, maybe it works short term, but it seems like the long term cost is potentially just way more than we'd ever want.
Very corrosive.
Let me just mention that all 11 Republican members of the Senate Judiciary Committee are white men. So to make an argument that they're at some sort of disadvantage and this is the left's war on white men is ridiculous, especially when you consider that the first accuser and the person who testified during this during this hearing is a white woman. This is not about race. I mean, it's absurd that they're trying to pivot the conversation to this nonsensical point.
Okay, so boy, there's a lot to break down here. Let me note that, by the way, I will have a conversation with Tucker Carlson at Politicon about this later this month. So politicon.com, and then enter the code TYT to see that live. And I can give you a preview of one thing that we're going to talk about, which is that I don't know anyone in this country more obsessed with race than Tucker Carlson.
Exactly. Exactly.
So what he did was he took quotes of people just noting that all 11 senators on the Republican side are old white men. Now, the operative word there isn't white, it's just a throw in. I don't know why they threw it in. I wasn't one of those pundits, right? Old is relevant because a lot of the power structure in DC is incredibly old. And there's nothing wrong with being old. One of of course, our favorite political figure is not young either. It's Bernie Sanders. But there is the old infrastructure which is held on to power and their corporate donors, et cetera. And yes, it's also on the Democratic side. Dianne Feinstein's 84. It's certainly on the Republican side with Hatch and Grassley, et cetera. And we noted that. The fact that there are men in this context is clearly relevant. In 202 years of the Judiciary Committee, the Republicans have never put a single female senator on that committee. So when issues like this have now unfortunately arisen with some regularity. The race part is a throwaway that I think either has barely been mentioned, certainly not something that has been trumpeted on the left or done big long segments how this is a race issue. You know, we, after over a week of covering this, finally begrudgingly talked about how perhaps they might have seen Anita Hill with a slightly different lens than they saw Dr. Blasey Ford. And that is in a way saying, well, they treated Blasey Ford fairly. So it's not even a negative connotation within that context of these hearings, right? The only one going nuts over race is Tucker.
Right.
Right, just saying, oh my race. And then what is that discussion of a conflict that might arise? What are you talking about, a race war?
That's exactly what he's talking about. And he's the one who is purposely pushing for that. Because again, the Kavanaugh thing has nothing to do with race. No one's arguing that this has, like, there's a racist issue here. Like, there's definitely an issue in terms of our lawmakers being out of touch. And I feel like that's been proven time and time again on a variety of issues, and certainly with the Kavanaugh hearings. But to say like, oh, this is all about race and there's gonna be a race war is insanely dangerous. And by the way, is a way of deflecting. I mean, he's deflecting so people don't pay attention, his viewers don't pay attention to the real issue at hand. And that issue is possible sexual misconduct. But by the way, Tucker Carlson wasn't the only person on Fox News who was spreading this nonsense. You have Alan Dershowitz, who appeared on Fox and Friends for a segment. Here's what he had to say.
Imagine if the situation were different. Imagine if a liberal Democrat president had appointed the first Muslim American to the Supreme Court, and somebody said, oh yeah, I remember he was a terrorist when he was 17. The ACLU would be all over this case. No, you can't presume guilt of terrorism. Everybody would be saying the burden of proof is so heavily, but when the shoe is on the other foot, when it's a white man being accused by the left of sexual offenses, all the rules are called off. The rules of presumption of innocence, the rules of due process. We know he's guilty because he's a white man, she's a woman, she's a survivor. That's the end of the inquiry.
So, curious example Dershowitz picked. First of all, I like how his mind automatically connects Muslim American to terrorists as the example.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's okay. That's okay. Let's go a little bit further into that. Imagine if a Muslim American was appointed to or was being considered for a high post, like, for example, the head of the DNC. And they pulled up charges from back when he was in school, not of being a terrorist, but of perhaps associating with Farrakhan, who is anti-Semitic. I mean, they would never bring that up, right? A white. That did happen, and they did bring it up immediately, and both the Republicans and the Democrats joined in on the frenzy to try to destroy his career. But I mean, Keith Ellison was the first Muslim American in Congress. They wouldn't bring up any sexual issues with him. Oh, right, they did in his race currently today. You could not pick a worse example. He's in the middle of a scandal as we speak. The idea that somehow the press, the Republicans, or even corporate Democrats wouldn't bring up those issues if it helped them. I mean, it is factually incorrect on its face as we sit today, let alone you talk about terrorism. In the 50th district in Congress, Amar Kampa-Najjar is running against Duncan Hunter Jr., who's actually in the middle of a corruption scandal. And Duncan Hunter Jr. is running ads saying that Amar Kampa-Najjar comes from a terrorist family. His grandfather, who died 17 or 27, I forget now, years before he was even born,
right,
is what the charges are about. But Amar Kampanijara, A, has never met his grandfather, and B, is Christian, was a youth minister. His mom is Mexican-American. But according to Dershowitz, nobody would ever bring that up if he's a Muslim American, or even people if they think he's a Muslim American. They thought Obama was a Muslim American. They went after him, even though he wasn't Muslim. You couldn't pick a worse example. But you know why they do it? Because in their minds, they're like, oh my God, we used to get away with everything. Now they're nitpicking us, and now we're under a microscope too? I mean, Muslim Americans, you think they're the ones that are powerful in this country?
Yeah.
I mean, are you insane? No, they're the ones you pick on a regular basis. Now, basically what he's doing is he's crying because, oh, what, now we have to apply the same standards that everybody gets to white men? To white men? We're gonna apply the same standards? An outrage. Where's the race war?
Yeah. By the way, just to be clear, if there were somehow miraculously a Muslim Supreme Court nominee and there were credible allegations against that person, I would also want an investigation. But remember, Dershowitz brings up the issue of due process. Obviously, this is not a criminal investigation. Kavanaugh is not going to get convicted of anything. This is about a job, right? This is about a job. So let's go back to the facts and realize this is not about a criminal prosecution. This is about further investigation to figure out whether or not someone has any right to be at the top of our justice system. By the way, due process. Okay, due process would mean that you investigate the allegations to either clear the person's name or find out if they're guilty. But the Republicans didn't want the due process. The Republicans were the ones who were skirting the issue of an FBI investigation from the beginning. It was Trump's White House that tried to limit the number of witnesses the FBI could speak to during this very short one-week investigation. And it wasn't until they were pressured into expanding the investigation that they allowed the FBI to speak to more witnesses. So you want to talk about due process, the only people that are trying to do away with due process in this case are the Republicans.
So lastly, let's also note, quick aside, that Tucker's guest, Dylan, civil rights attorney, hilarious, said that there are certain places on Berkeley's campus where white people are not allowed to go. Is that true? Of course not. Just another thing that's made up by the right wing. There was a proposal in 2016 that there be spaces of color. Now, I'm not sure that I agree with that proposal, but it's basically like an African-American group getting together and saying this is our student group, and so we'd like to have a private meeting, right? How dare you? White people are being banned at Berkeley. Okay, and it didn't even, to the best of my knowledge and what I've read today, it didn't even pass. So, oh my God, it's begun. They're discriminating against white people in Berkeley. Okay, so look, they force us into these conversations. So I don't know of any African-American group, Latino group, Asian group, or anyone planning a race war. Who are the only people who have talked about race wars? The shooter in Charleston, South Carolina, that shot up a black church, talked about a race war. Several different right-wing shooters actually, and this doesn't get a lot of press coverage, in their manifestos talked about race wars. I don't know anybody on the other side talking about race wars. I do know several right-wing killers, murderers, mass murderers who have talked about race wars. And I know Tucker Carlson talking about race wars. And Tucker, remind me, if there was a war against any particular race in this country, which one it was against? I'm pretty sure it was against African Americans. Which race enslaved the other race? Which race took away the other race's rights for hundreds of years? No, look, I know that you're aggrieved that you cannot do it anymore. I know it bothers you to your core. That some of the things that you cherish, like being able to oppress others, is slowly, way too slowly being taken away from you. But no one on our side is talking about starting any kind of race war because that's mental. And we're not holding people to account for what happened hundreds of years ago. But if you're gonna have a conversation about if there was a race war in this country, well, there was one. And it was done to black people in this country. It was done to Native Americans in this country. So don't pretend that all of a sudden like, oh my God, white people about race? And again, being discriminated against. Your group, and I don't mean white people, I mean conservatives, right-wing zealot conservatives, oppressed different races in this country for hundreds of years. So you don't get to turn around now and pretend you're the aggrieved party here. And my God, what if there was a race war? There already was one, Tucker. And it was your right-wing brothers and sisters who did that race war and enslaved and lynched and murdered people in this country for hundreds of years. So at least please have the decency to shut up about it.
Let's take a break. When we come back, more news, including how the House passed additional tax cuts when no one was looking.